Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. And now, here are Bob and Richard.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. My name's Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Today we're starting the first of 3 shows dedicated to blackjack. As we do this, the Blackjack Ball has just ended. We have 2 guests from the Blackjack Ball, and then there will be our annual Blackjack Ball celebration. So to start off this trio of blackjack is Bryce Carlson. Bryce Carlson wrote the book Blackjack for Blood almost 30 years ago. It's been revised, slightly revised, more than slightly times. And we're here to talk to him. Bryce Carlson, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, the book was written in 92.
Mm-hmm.
How long were you playing, and at what level before you wrote the book?
Wait, 92?
Yeah. First edition was 92.
I thought it was much earlier than that.
No, 92. I had been playing seriously since the late 70s. So, for a while, for like 14, 15 years before the actual book was published.
But some of the chapters were written earlier or so as you...
Yeah. I mean, it took me a few years to write the book. I didn't write it like in 6 months. It took me a few years to write the book. And some of the events that I recount in the book were, historical things that had happened to me several years previous to that.
So, as I recall, one of the things that was really unusual about the book was, didn't the first edition come with software of some kind?
Yeah, because as I think I mentioned I may have mentioned in the book or at least maybe in some articles, is I wrote some simulation software because I was doing my own research, trying to find out exactly what my advantage was with certain subsets, and so I wrote some simulation software. And
right,
I included. I just included it. Then I wrote some documentation for it and included it with the book. Actually, the book had, I think the book, if I remember correctly, originally it just had a certificate or something, and you send in the certificate with I think a few bucks, $30, $40, something like that, and then we would mail you I had a computer company at the time, and they would handle it for me. They would mail the software and the documentation. But, after several years, that software became kind of obsolete given the state of the art, and so I just deleted it.
It's probably DOS language.
It was originally written for lower end Apples, like lower end Macs, and then I wrote another one. In conjunction with another fellow, John Emming. I don't know if you've heard of John.
Yeah,
Emming.
sure.
Yeah. Okay. John had a program. It was written in assembler, and it was a fairly sophisticated program. It was very, very, very buggy. That was a problem with it. It would crash all over the place. But I actually purchased the core of that, the engine of that, and then wrote another piece of software which I called the Omega 2 Blackjack Casino. The original one was the Omega 2 Blackjack Machine. That was the Apple one. Then I wrote the Omega 2 Blackjack Casino in conjunction with Emming and using his engine, And that one was pretty good. In fact, I still use that one. I mean, it's not state of the art by any means. I mean, given what's out there today, it's not even close. But it's very practical, and I use it, and it's really good for running simulations and figuring out what the situation is in particular cases with rules and penetration and everything you want to know about a particular game.
So the book, the thing that I liked about the book, I liked blackjack books that include stories about playing blackjack, which the book has.
Yeah.
But in the book, you developed the Omega 1 and the Omega 2 count systems, right? And why did you decide there were already so many count systems out there. Yeah. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, when I wrote the book, I wanted to include my own count system. And I looked at the ones that were out there, and the one that I actually, first off, I had played Lawrence Revere's, Spec Parsons' 14 count, which I actually bought from him. I got a copy of Playing Blackjack as a Business. I remember when I first walked into a bookstore, I was actually looking for a chess book. I was looking for Aaron Nimzovich's My System. And so I'm with the game system, and I happened to see this red hardcover book with spiral bound, and I pulled it out, and it was Playing Blackjack as a Business. I couldn't help but laugh. I go, playing blackjack as a business, really. This is before I was really that serious about it. So I go, please get real. At that point, I had pretty much memorized Thorpe's book. I mean, I read that book. I read Beat the Dealer so many times that I actually almost memorized the book. If you read a sentence from any page, I could read you the page just from memory. It was crazy. But anyway, so I was really
not including all the charts.
No, well, actually, I did memorize the charts too. I mean, the 10-count charts. So anyway, so I saw this book, Playing Blackjack as a Business, and I thought, this is a little hubris here. So I started looking. And I go, hey, this is a serious book. So I bought the book, and I was very influenced by that. I was very influenced by his book, and I did. So I actually called him up, and I made an appointment to meet him in Vegas. And I came over, and he had a little house, in Vegas, and I met with him, and he was an interesting character. I mean,
He wanted you to take lessons at $50 an hour?
Yeah, his deal was, well, let's see, I'll train you on Thursday and Friday, and I'll finger you to the bosses on Saturday, because he was a total hustler. There's no question about that, but he was a colorful character, and you couldn't kind of help but like the guy, And his 14 count was a very good count. It was very hard. It was a level 4 count, which is not easy, even though I was playing mostly single deck at the time, And it was a level 4 count, and it was a strong count. I actually played it with 2 side counts, an ace side count, because it was not ace reckon, it was an ace 0 count. So if you wanted accurate betting, you had to keep an ace side count. So I could do that. And then one thing about it that really annoyed me was the 9 was valued at -2, so it was a big minus count. And when you would get a big plus count, a lot of times that big plus count would be significantly consisting of 9s. And that was annoying, because what would happen is you'd get a significant plus count, the dealer would have an ace up.
Wait, why would it be consisting a lot of 9s if 9s were -2?
Well, plus counts. -2. So, when you have a plus count, little cards are out, big cards, the minus cards are still in there.
I
the
see what
10s
you
and the
mean.
9s.
I see what you mean.
It was a minus count card, -2.
Yeah.
10s were -3, aces with
Were
a side
0.
count were 0, but you counted them as plus and -4 on the side count. But anyway, so if you had a big plus count, it would be typically 9s and 10s. So dealer has an ace up, you take insurance, you lose the insurance because the 9 is sitting down there. This is really annoying. Then when he flips up his hole card, you lose to the 20 because he has a 9 in the hole. So I thought, and this happened so much that this is really annoying me. So I started side counting 9s too, so I could adjust in close situations. I could adjust for whether there was an excess or a shortage of 9s. And if there was an excess of 9s, then I wouldn't take insurance in close situations. But it was hard to do. I mean, it was a compulsive thing to do, really.
Yeah.
And it was hard to do because I was counting aces with a ring and 9s with my feet. I'm sure I looked like I was having an epileptic seizure to anybody watching me very closely, But, it worked. But anyway, it was a hard count. So when I did my own book, the other count that I liked and really respected was the high up 2.
Right.
And that's really an excellent count. But the one thing about it that I started thinking, what could I do to make a better count for my book that's like this? And I looked at Griffin's charts, and actually he listed what became the Advanced Omega 2, that count, the Omega 2 count, as optimal, better than the high up 2 count. It has the playing correlation isn't quite as high because the 9 has a -1 count. But the insurance, actually the playing is about the same. The
insurance is better.
Insurance is not better because of the 9. The 9 is a -1 where it's a 0. Where it kind of I think the betting was a little better. The playing was about the same, but the insurance was not quite as good. I think the insurance correlation for Omega 2 is like 8.7, something like that, and for high up 2 is a little bit higher. But the thing I did like about it was very close to Zen. The only difference in Zen is the Zen had the ace and the 9 flipped in terms of the value. The ace -1, the 9 0. Here the 9 was -1 and the ace was 0, but it was the same number of points and everything else about it was the same. And why that was good was because if you played 6 decks, you could flip to the Zen and keep the same playing indices, and they were still quite accurate because there was such a close count. And that was handy because for a lot of people, I knew when I was writing the book, I wasn't writing it just for myself. I was writing it for other people. And I knew for myself that playing 6-deck games with a side count of aces was a challenge. It was easy with 1 or 2 decks. I mean, I just count them on my ring, fingers and ring, done. 6 decks, a little trickier. And I could do it, but I knew that this is a struggle even for me, and I'm doing it all the time. So I thought, what could I do to make it so this count isn't just pegged as a 1 and 2 deck count and not practical for 6 decks? So I thought, well, if you can flip to the Zen. The Zen is ace reckoned. You don't keep a side count of aces. And it's almost exactly the same count. You just flip the ace and the 9, and I can still use the same indices because they're so close. The counts are so close that they're accurate. And so I included a section in the book about how to play 6 decks if you have difficulty keeping a side count of aces. And that was one of the main reasons I did it, was because it made playing 6 decks easy for amateur players, they weren't in the trenches all the time and practicing like I did to get good at keeping a side count in multiple deck games.
Yeah.
And it still was good. It's about on par with high up 2. If you have, basically the way it worked out is if you have deeper penetration, like in a double deck game, if you have really deep penetration, AO2 will outperform high up 2 because the betting correlation is a little bit better. But if you don't have quite as good a penetration, then AO2 is a little better. So they were very, very close.
Yeah. And so what do you play now? Because you're still playing actively, right?
Yeah. I play Omega 2 and I play High Up 2. I play them both depending upon the game. The counts are very similar. It just, there's not a whole lot of difference between them. And so I play AO2 most of the time.
And are you playing mostly double deck then? Or
I like to play double deck.
Yeah.
I mean, when I go on junks, of course, it's all 6 decks, And I do play.
And do you switch then for 6 deck, or you still play AO2 or High Up 2?
I play High Up 2 or AO2 with 6 decks, and I don't really have that much trouble keeping a side count of aces because I've been doing it so long. I can do it. But I know that a lot of players, especially amateur players who are not playing all the time, they're fairly serious about it, but they're not like in the trenches and really dedicated to it the way I am or other professional players are. They really do have a hard time with a side count, an accurate side count of aces. If you don't side count aces accurately, don't side count aces because it'll really screw you up. It's important to do it if you can do it accurately. So.
Yeah, I went back when there were so many handheld games, single deck and double deck.
Yeah.
I would switch back and forth between High Up 2 for handheld games and High Low for multiple deck games. And
High-Low's a good solid strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets the job done, and it's easy to play in multiple deck games. It's an ace reckoned count, and the numbers don't get too big.
Well, and if you're playing multiple deck games for many, many hours in a session, for me to play High Up 2 in a 6 deck game for a 6 or 8 hour session, was just
tiring.
Too tiring.
Yeah.
So,
no, I know what you're saying. Yeah, it can be. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Good. So how would a lot of players, when they go in, use a hit and run strategy where they're usually barred within a half hour or an hour, or they think they're not doing things right?
Yeah.
Is this your system?
No. I mean, that's a turn and burn. Just show it to them, and they'll take it as long as they take it, and they throw you out, and fine. You're not the only game in town, and even if I'm blackballed everywhere, I'll just train somebody else to play my system.
Or drive down to the next state.
Yeah, you drive to the next state. That's the road warrior strategy, and it's probably very interesting. And people have made big money doing that because they just show it to them. No compromise. This is it. This is my play. I spread like this. It's usually they oftentimes incorporate it with some camouflage. Like trying to play the high roller in a believable way, and so that they're betting big money. The clubs don't really want to throw them out till they're sure that they've got something on the game.
And with that strategy, every once in a while you end up in a place that just lets you play for a week or 2 weeks or something. And it is. You just don't know how long they will take it.
Yeah, just how long they'll take it. But that's never been my thing because I like to. When I lived in Southern California, I focused on Vegas primarily. I would do junkets to the Bahamas and around in Europe sometimes, but I like to play in Vegas. And so I didn't want to get myself barred all over town, which was not hard to do, And so I play on Reno as well. And now with these Indian casinos in California, I play in a lot of the Indian casinos. And I like to come back. I like to play. I don't like to be barred. Plus, my wife hates it when I get barred.
It upsets her because
It does upset her. She doesn't like it.
How did she
does
take
she
to
think
the
you're
whole?
a criminal or what?
No, it's just uncomfortable for her. And I remember one time this goes back a few years ago. I was there with my son who was just turned 21. And so we went over to the Silverton, and I thought, well, we'll sit there. So I was sitting there playing at the Silverton, and I wasn't really showing them much. I mean, yeah, I was playing my game, but I was playing like maybe $100 was my big bet. I was just fooling around, and I got backed off. Then they backed off him because he was with me. He wasn't even at the same table, but they figured that out. So then my wife got really mad. She goes, our son got backed off thanks to you.
Well, and my wife hated it too. Actually, back when I met more than 20 years ago, I stopped staying where I was playing.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, especially if I was with my family.
Right.
Because we got escorted out of a hotel in the middle of our stay.
Oh, yeah.
And my wife was not happy about that at all. I mean, our kids were in strollers at the time.
Man. I keep waiting for that to happen to me. So far, that particular embarrassment hasn't happened yet, but it certainly easily could,
Yeah.
For me in video poker at the Silverton, before they took away most of my privileges, they were sending me $40 a week at the gift shop. And Bonnie loved the little klutzy jewelry you can get there. And so she would make deals with the owner to buy a particular one, and they would save up
layaway
coupons.
$40 a week.
Something like that. And Bonnie loved that. And for a long time, she would be wearing something, and I go, did I buy you those? She goes, oh, yes, you have really great taste. So when we got backed off from the Silverton, that was disappointing to Bonnie.
I'm amazed you lasted as long as you did, because that place is pretty aggressive. I mean, they don't get really nasty about it, but they will back you off.
Well, I'm a video poker player.
Oh,
and
okay. So they were more tolerant there.
They were for a while, and now they just removed all playable games. So a lot of the players have just decided not to go. They still had... You get 1,000 points if you show up on your birthday, which is worth $3. I got 6 emails from buddies who know that I'm no longer really welcome there. Say, make sure you go into Silverton, get your 1,000 points. But
get your 1,000 points.
Somehow I forgot to do that.
So were you married when you started playing? And if not, how did your wife come to the idea? How did she take the idea?
We got married about the time that I had been fooling around with it for several years, since reading Thorpe's book, and but not really too seriously. I would just go to Vegas and I would do it, and then I had my own little wrinkles on what to do. And I remember before I had really studied the Kelly system, like basically proportional betting based upon the percentage advantage, I developed it for myself. I thought, well, you know what? There's got to be a better way than just doing a fixed fraction, like betting, let's say 100, 200, 400 with the count. There's got to be a way that when you're losing, you bring your stake back, and when you're winning, you increase it, and it isn't going to affect the edge. Because you've got a bigger stake and you have a smaller stake. So I sort of intuited that, and did some back of the envelope calculations, but I didn't really fully understand the mathematics of it, and I didn't really quite get it right. So I would. It just didn't. I think I was backing off too fast and then increasing too fast, and I was running into a situation where if you bet twice Kelly, the Kelly criterion, you get into a situation where your mean increases, but your median goes down. It's weird. Your median approaches zero actually if you bet more than 2 times Kelly, but actually your mean goes higher, and so I would experience that where I would seemingly like I'm making these positive expectation games hour after hour after hour, but I seemed like I'm going down, down, down. And all of a sudden I would have this incredible winning streak. It was really crazy. But later on when I read Peter Griffin's book, and some other got a little more mathematically sophisticated about it, I go, okay, I see what the deal is here. And so then I got a little better with it. But I had some early on, I didn't really have it perfected, mainly because I started fooling around with the betting, using what really amounted to a Kelly system, but it was not one that was totally mathematically sound. And sometimes I was betting more than twice the Kelly criterion, which, as I say, results in a weird divergence between the mean and the median. And I didn't really understand why it was happening, but I clearly saw it was happening. And later I got more sophisticated about it and understood what to do. And from then on, I was just winning consistently. I was playing single deck games. I actually would go to Vegas for like 2 or 3 days, because I had a full-time job. And we would go for 2 or 3 days, but I was president of the company, so if I wanted to take an extra day, I did. And over 2 and 3 day trips, I won 26 trips in a row. 26, wow. Yeah. I mean, the chances of that, but this was all single deck. I was playing at places like the Dunes, which would deal down to about 5 cards from the end, and other places. Castaways had a good game, There was some professor.
Very good.
There was some professor from the University of Nevada that was actually their casino manager. I forget the guy's name.
Bill Friedman.
Yeah, Friedman, exactly. Yeah. And his deal was he was pretty tolerant, And
he was very tolerant. I worked there at the time.
Oh, did you?
I worked there starting in the beginning of 1970. The end of 78.
Yeah.
To 82.
Oh, okay. That's about when I was. Yeah, about 82 or so.
Every card counter in the world came in there. Because it was even off the top, single deck, stand 17.
Stand 17, double on, first 2. I don't
double on any 2.
Was double after splits too?
No double after split.
Well, yeah, but not any 2, deck. First 2.
Yeah.
Well,
double
any 2, a lot of times they use that to mean double after splits. But okay. I did get back off there finally, though. In fact, I document that in the book, that particular back off. Because what happened was I was sitting there playing at the Castaways one night. It was like 2 a.m. or something. But the table was fairly full. And it got down to the most ridiculous plus count I had ever seen. It was like a true count of plus 50 or 60. It was incredible. And I ended up, I was playing 2 hands. I think I had like $300 on each one. And I had 20 on the first hand and ace-9 on the second hand. And the dealer had a 6 up. And I'm sitting there going, oh, man, I know I need to double that. I mean, mathematics wasn't even close, Yeah. So I thought, that's such a giveaway. So I thought, I'm going to do it. So I doubled the sucker, and I doubled the ace-9. And I saw when he gave me the down card, I happened to see it when he put it down. I didn't really finger, but I saw it. It was a 10. I go, money in the bank. So he has a 6 up. He pulls a 10, and he hits the sucker with a 5. And I go, Jesus Christ, So that I lost like $900 on that. And so then
you didn't split the 10s.
I did not split the 10s, which would even have been a better play.
Yeah.
Actually, mathematically, that would have been a better play. But I did not split the 10s, but I did double down on the ace-9. I mean, normally I wouldn't have done either one of those because they're kind of giveaways in a situation like that with an obvious plus count, down deep, single deck. I wouldn't have done it for camouflage purposes, but for some reason I felt inspired to double on the ace-9, even though it was more of a giveaway than splitting the 10s, which, as you say, well, why didn't you just do that?
Yeah.
So anyway, I did it, and I lost. The whole table lost. Everybody's moaning. In the meantime, the pit boss is kind of watching that from over there. I don't think it was Friedman. It was some other pit boss. He was watching it, and he comes over, and the dealer's got like about 9 cards left in his hand, something like that, or maybe less, between 7 and 9 cards. He says, let me see those cards. So he took the cards and he spread them. Every one was a 10. Every one. The last, whatever it was, 7, 8, 9 cards were all 10s. And he looks at me and he says, pal, you played your last hand. Bye. So that not only did I give myself away and get backed off, but I lost $900. But c'est la vie,
Well, when Bill Friedman first came in there, he advertised the most liberal game in Las Vegas, and he had this game that
the 20 deck shoe. Do you remember that one? He had a game where he had a shoe that was like this. The thing had I don't know how many decks in it. It was crazy.
That one was before my time.
Okay.
But originally he had these games that had double on 3-4 cards.
Unlimited
splitting. I think there was like a 6-card Charlie rule. I mean, and so it was advantage off the top.
But I think those games with the trick rules were mostly multiple decks. I think because he had 1 or 2 6-deck games
it was
too.
multiple decks. Yeah.
The single decks were just straight Vegas rules at the time. Strip rules.
So we had both single deck and we also had 4-deck games.
Yeah, 4 decks at the time. Yeah. They hadn't really gone to 6-deck that much.
Not in the Castaways. Other places were starting to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, I remember that. I just feasted there for a long time. It was
everybody did, and
great
that's how I
go-to
really
game.
got to meet
Yeah.
like all the card counters in town.
Card counter convention.
It was, yeah. Everybody would show up eventually. And,
yeah, for sure. And he was very tolerant,
Yeah.
because his theory was that, well, here's the thing that he believed, and I think he was right, that most card counters don't play a winning game.
Right.
In fact, when I play for longevity. I like to go to the same clubs all the time, and I play for longevity. I mean, I do travel around, but I like to, kind of hang out in the same places. And what I found is that most counters are really more like compulsive card watchers than they are trained counters. And some of them are actually card counters that are keeping a fairly accurate count, but most of them don't really play a winning game because first off, they have a lot of gamble in them. A lot of them have a lot of gamble. So they'll play hunches once in a while. They'll deviate from the count. They'll play hunches and they make mistakes. And so even though they're playing with a significantly less of a disadvantage than the average player, they play longer, they bet bigger, and every time they lose, it's just a bad run of cards. So I think the casinos have sort of snapped that counters as a class are really not bad customers.
Well, there are very few, I think, that have snapped to that because many of them will bar those players even though they're not good players.
Well, they do. Some of them have that attitude that they will. But in my experience, there's been quite a few that have over the years, I think that was the initial impression that counters were like locusts. They're just going to pick us clean. But I think over time they realize that really is not the case, even though the games have deteriorated over time, for sure. And they've tried to make them safer and safer. They've sort of realized over time that as a class, most amateur card counters are good customers. As I say, yes, they don't play with a 1.5%, 2% disadvantage. Maybe they're playing with a 0.5% or 0.75% disadvantage, but they're playing longer, they're betting bigger, and the beauty of it is every time they lose, it's just a bad run of cards, so they're right back at it the next day. And so when I play, I do some camouflage, but I don't give much away.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you. When you say you do some camouflage, is it just by using a smaller spread, or do you actually make non-correct plays? Like, will you stand on a7 against a 10 or something? Or is it just about your bet spread?
It's mostly about a modest bet spread, I do some, what I try to do is I chat at the table continually, talking and everything, and I try to present myself as someone who likes the game but doesn't really know a tremendous amount about it. Like I'll ask pit bosses for advice on close hands where it doesn't matter which way I do. Like I say I have 16 and the bosses watch and say, what do you think, man? What do you think? 16, are you feeling it? What should I do? Because I don't care what he says. Whatever he says, I'll do because it's so close, in a situation like that. So I'll ask the pit, I'll ask dealers in close situations where I know it doesn't matter which way I go mathematically long term. I'll ask for advice, when I do something, let's say I have a big minus count and I've got a stiff against I've got like 13, 14 against the stiff and I know I'm supposed to hit it. I'll just go, I never know what to do with this hand. I'll take a hit and I'll say bust. I'll go, you know what? I knew that was the wrong play. Well, what a stupid thing to do, So I play as best I can. Like, first off, I'm deviating from basic strategy because I'm playing a lot of double deck. So I'm deviating from basic strategy a lot. So, and I'm not always playing it the same way. So I go out of my way to try to be friendly to the pit. I'll talk with those guys as long as they want to talk. I ask for their advice. Same thing with the dealers. And if it doesn't work out, well, I knew that was stupid. You should have stopped me, And so I try to cultivate a sort of an image of someone who doesn't really know a tremendous amount about the game. I don't shuffle checks at the table. I don't do things that are clearly obvious that I really live at the table at all. I try to just look like pretty much someone who plays the game kind of like a tourist somewhat,
Right, but the analysis these days is coming from the eye in the sky, and they can't hear any of that.
Well, they see they can intuit a lot of it because I'm showing my cards to the dealer. It's pretty obvious, even without the sound, what I'm doing.
Right, but if they run the software on you, then they're going to know that when you made the non-basic strategy play, that it was the correct play.
Yeah, so you can't play too long.
Okay, so you limit your sessions and you limit your bet spread.
Yes.
But you don't actually make any incorrect plays.
Rarely.
Other than something that's a coin flip where it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, borderline plays I will sometimes.
Sure.
But I don't give a whole lot of it away. I really don't give a lot of it because it's a tough game. It's not that easy. You're playing in today's game, even with a decent double deck game like soft 17 double on any two, including double after splits. And they're dealing down to say, between a quarter, between a half and maybe a little more than that, cutting off. You got
half of the two decks.
Half of the two decks. Yeah, half of the maybe that's really a good game. But a lot of times it's a little more than they're cutting off, a little more than half. Maybe they're cutting off 35 cards, something like that. It's still a good, acceptable game. It's still a tough game. There's no question about it. If you're playing with a 1.5% advantage, you're doing well.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it comes down to. And unless you're really going to spread your bets like crazy, and that's likely to get you backed off. So I'm not doing it. I'm usually spreading a double deck, maybe 6-1, something like that.
Yeah, that'll still get you backed off in a lot of places. But.
Well, yeah, I occasionally get backed. And also, I get, it's amazing how many convenient cell phone calls I get on minus decks. You'd be surprised. Or nature calls at the craziest times, So you can't overdo that, but I do get out of a lot of bad decks. I mean, I won't sit there and hammer a huge minus count. I just figure out a way not to play it. And but you can't do that with every significant minus deck, or they clearly are going to pick up on you.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of little. I mean, for me, it's all second nature. I've been doing it so long that I can feel the vibes. You can really feel. That's true. From the upstairs, you really don't know. But and sometimes you will get caught upstairs. You may have the pit boss snowed blind, and the same thing with the dealer, and you think everything's simpatico. This is all giggles, and bang. You get nailed from upstairs, But a lot of times there's some communication back and forth, one way or the other, and you get so you can sort of sense the mood,
Yeah, sure.
And
for me, I always thought it was a tremendous benefit to having been a dealer and a boss.
Yeah,
because I would see things coming down before they got too bad.
Before it got too bad.
Get out. Yeah.
Yeah, and signals, exactly. In the old days, when it seemed like the bosses had a little more authority and they were the ones that were the primary, it was a lot easier because you could sense you'd have two bosses sitting there like this, throwing you evil little eyes, and you go, it's time to leave.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you have bosses that don't know. They know very little about the game itself. They know how to count the checks in the rack, and they know how to do the pit boss things, but some of them, not all of them, but some of them don't know a whole lot about the game because they don't really have to. You got the eye that's doing that.
Right.
And so it is, you can get blindsided by the eye more than in the early days when it seemed like the pit bosses were the primary first line of defense.
Well, in the early days, there was nobody up in the eye the vast majority of the time.
There was just a plane, a guy with a pair of binoculars, maybe, walking the catwalk. But so it has changed somewhat. But actually, I don't really get backed off that much.
So when back in the 70s or 80s, my friends and I always at the time bemoaned the fact that we were young because it seemed like all the card counters
were
25-year-old nerds, and we thought, man, if I was 50, they'd never back me off,
right?
And I'm wondering,
or a woman,
or now
they're such
Asian,
chauvinists,
but so I'm wondering if that has changed. Do you feel like it has bought you a lot of protection now being older?
I think they're maybe. I think they're more respectful. I mean, when you get a little bit of age on you, they're not going to treat you like a kid.
Well, the other thing is when you're 25 or whatever, they're always like, where did this kid get all this money?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I cover that in the book. When I got backed off at the dunes in Blackjack for Blood, I was pretty young kid, I was playing pretty big money too, like $400 or $500 a hand, and you could tell, where's this guy getting this money? Is this his tuition? Was he blowing his college fund or what? But I think I get treated, even if they're not too happy with me, I get treated with more respect than I did when I was really young.
Thank you. We're talking to Bryce Carlson, Blackjack for Blood. We now have to take a brief commercial break. The South Point has more than 10,000 games, returning more than 99%. This is more than anyone else has. The February promotion of buffets earning ends the day this is posted. However, you still have until next Thursday, March 5th, to use your buffet tickets. On Tuesday, February 21st, the video poker class is Advanced NSU Deuces Wild. NSU is a Deuces Wild game returning 99.7. They have a .3 club at the South Point and various promotions and mailers. So it's slightly positive. Now, what advanced means are the exceptions to the regular strategy, such as when you're dealt deuce 4-5 of the same suit, it's close whether you just hold the deuce or you hold deuce 4-5, and it depends on the other two cards. So what advanced strategy does is explains the situations, why those other cards matter, what they are. In many cases, it's a type of applied logic. So casual players, don't waste your time on an advanced class. Players who are playing regularly for money that's important to them, the advanced class will pick you up some money. Every semester we have one advanced class. This time it is NSU Deuces. At videopoker.com, it's the best place to play lots of games. If you sign up for the gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year, this allows you to get correction on most of the games. An additional membership, their pro membership, is sold separately, $6.95 a month or $49.95 a year, or if you already have the gold membership, there is a cheaper combined price. The big advantage to the pro membership is it has all of the Ultimate X triple play and 5-play schedules with 100% accurate strategies. Also has the same for quick quads and a number of other games that the software is not included in any other available software. So if you play Ultimate X or some of these other games, check it out. It will be useful to you. Listeners to our show can try out 1,000 free hands to find out what it's like at videopoker.com/GWAE. All right, we're back to Bryce Carlson. Another one of our sponsors is BlackjackApprenticeship.com, and the leader of that, Colin Jones, recently wrote a book, 21st Century Card Counter, about road warriors in the past 5 or so years who are doing very well on that. So have you seen that book yet?
Actually, I have not.
Okay. I would actually encourage you to look at it, simply because, according to these guys, the world has changed in blackjack more, and I suspect you would, as an old timer who would do things the way you've done them for 40 years, there's some stuff to pick up. There's a lot of the people, it's an interview book, and a lot of the interviewees have also been interviewed on this show. Mm-hmm. And we know them, and I encourage you and our listeners to pick them up. Now,
well, actually, on that, regarding that, your strategy, which is a stay and play kind of strategy, lends itself. Do you go after cash comps at the places that you're staying? So
no, I usually do not. If I'm on a comp, if I'm on a junket, of course, then I do. But then I'm compromising my game too. I'm not playing to really go for the money. When I'm on junkets, I'm playing to just play a slight winning game, maybe 0.5% edge or so, but I'm just trying to maximize comps. But when I'm playing for the money, I don't even have a player's card. I try to play as anonymously as I possibly can. My wife will, and she has her little slots and the rest of it, and it's amazing how many freebies we get just off of her card, But I don't. I don't even take out a card.
Yeah.
So, when I play, I think that there are a number of casinos in my experience that realize that most card counters, or at least compulsive card watchers, which is really what most of them are, don't really play a winning game. So when I play, as I say, I don't give a lot away. I compromise on, I'm not playing a 1 to 10 spread, just tracking up and down like, say, in Beat the Dealer or something. So I'm compromising on the bet spread significantly, but I'm not giving anything away on the play of the hands, hardly, except in really borderline cases. And even on betting, I do compromise. Usually I'm using, like, with double deck, I'm using like a 6 to 1 spread. On single deck, it's like maybe a 3 to 1, something like that. So I'm compromising on the
3
spread.
to 1 on single deck. I mean, first of all, I don't know many single decks that exist anymore.
Well,
but,
Cache Creek in up in Northern California has a single deck stand-on soft 17 game.
3 to 2?
Yes, 3 to 2, stand-on soft 17. Now, they only allow double on 10 and 11, but still, you're only down about 0.28, something like that. I mean,
that's the old Reno game.
Yeah, no, their penetration, well, except the Reno game is hit soft 17. These guys stand on it. This is basically Reno rules stand on soft 17.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you're down, it's about minus 0.3 or a little better than minus 0.3. It's a good game. And their penetration isn't very good, but still, you can get something in the game,
Huh. You mentioned junkets a few times. Are there still junkets that exist?
Well, you put up money. You can call. You can use. You can
put up front money.
Yeah, you put up front money. Like the times I've been to the Atlantis, I usually put up about 8,000. They'll settle for less, but 8,000 makes them happy. That seems like a number they like. That you just deposit that money in the cage, and then they like to see an average bet of about $100. And for a long time, I was getting. Comp, my wife and I and my son, at the time, and in a really nice players suite way up high overlooking everything, and even credits towards the food. Food is very expensive at Atlantis. I mean, the restaurants are pretty good, but they charge a damn fortune for them.
But they're not giving you airfare for that.
No, they're not. They're not giving you airfare. But airfare wasn't that expensive, really. I mean, it wasn't too bad. And I did that a number of times, and some other places too. So, but again, I didn't really, even though I eventually got backed off from their blackjack game, it took quite a while. I mean, I'd been like 5 junkets before they finally got snapped to me. But I wasn't really going for the juggler. I was playing very modest bet spread, and just showing them the action they wanted to see, and playing with probably maybe a 0.5% advantage. I mean, I wasn't going to play a losing game, but I wasn't really playing a winning game either.
No, but that, I mean,
a big winning game. It was a winning game, but nominal winning game.
I mean, many players are just after the cash, but, a free vacation at the Atlantis in the Bahamas is worth an awful lot of money. So
Plus I was there. I didn't want the stress of playing a serious big money game because I just wanted to have fun. When I go on a junket, I'm there to have fun. And
the last thing you want is to get barred when you're there on a vacation with your family.
Or to be playing money that's at the higher limit of what I'm comfortable with and go on a losing streak and ruin the entire vacation. Who needs it, So those are just for fun, basically. I mean, they're just, free prepaid vacations. They're worth a lot of money if you go to the right places, Yeah. But, I mean,
any other nice resorts like that that you can recommend?
Well, Atlantis is definitely my favorite. Let's see, where else is good? I don't know, off the top of my head, for the sand and surf vacations, that's probably the best one. I mean, you can't miss with that place. I love that. So anyway, back to my normal thing. So when I play, as I say, I moderate my bet spread. I don't give away hardly anything, virtually nothing on the play of the hands. And I'm alert to what's going on, and I try to catch the vibes of how it's going. But I think that I'm willing to be viewed by the casino as kind of an amateur compulsive card watcher. Not really a counter, but obviously my bets are going up and down. They're correlating with the count. And I think that after I've played for a while and they see me for a while, they sort of know this guy knows his way around a blackjack table somewhat. But in general, they're tolerant of me. And I'm trying to project a tourist who likes to come to Vegas, likes to play blackjack and some other games, just at small level, but is sort of like an amateur compulsive card watcher. And in their experience, those are losing players. And so I get away with that. That seems to be my thing. Now, there are situations where I have just gone for the throat. I'll tell you all, one strategy I had that worked for years was in downtown Reno. They had these little storefront casinos right on Virginia.
Sure.
Yeah, they're not
like
really
Fitzgerald's
smaller than Fitzgerald's. Like, I forget the name of them, but there were 3 or 4 that were small, just small little, almost like little storefronts. They had like maybe 3 blackjack games or something, 4 games. They were small. But they were just standard Reno rules, single deck, and so I would go in there, and what they were comfortable typically with was like a 10 to 50 spread. They would go with that, like you could spread 5-1, but they didn't want to see a bet over $50. They weren't comfortable with that. So what I would do is I would go in there and I would sit and I would play for like about an hour and see what happened. Sooner or later, and usually sooner rather than later, I would get a nice little run. I'd get up like about $1,000 on him, and then I would show it to him. Then I would give it to him. And instead of 10 to 50, now it's 2 to 4, and immediately the dealer would start shuffling on me. So then I would call the pit boss over and I'd say, your dealer Bob here, and he's really slowing down the game. I mean, he's like 3 hands and he's shuffling. I mean, I didn't come here to watch the dealer shuffle. I want to play blackjack. Could you please tell him to deal the normal game? And this point, they didn't want to lose me because I was up on him 1,000. Even though I was showing it to them now, they still would go with the program. And so then they would start dealing this good game. And that I would just show it to them. I would just throw them a 4-1 bet spread, 2 to 8 like that, and just take it as long as they could handle it, And then I did that for quite a while those little clubs were there. I would come up every few months and hit this one. And then next time I would hit that one. And all it really seemed to take was if you got up about 1,000 on them at a level they were comfortable with in terms of your bet spread, that was setting the hook. And once you'd set the hook, they would go with it because they would try to shuffle up, but then they would then if you requested them for whatever reason, like it's slowing the game down, this is really boring, I can't deal with this, I'm going to have to leave if your boy Bob here doesn't start dealing some cards, they would play with you, So that was, but normally I don't really go for the throat, but I did there. That was one that worked really good, and I did that for a long time. And those little clubs aren't there anymore. Too bad.
Reno really has kind of really died. I mean,
it has. There aren't very many good games there anymore. There are a few games. Like once in a while I get down, at the Legacy. The Legacy has a decent single deck game. And their double deck game's not too bad either, and they're pretty tolerant. But there aren't really that many good clubs in Reno anymore, that's for sure. Better games, Indian casinos. There's the Indian casinos. Actually, there's some decent games there. Good double deck games.
I have a question about your camouflage.
Yeah.
Without describing it, you are wearing more than a minimum amount of jewelry on your hands.
I never wear jewelry when I play.
Okay, that was my question.
Except for the ring, but not that. Definitely not that, and nothing that would be defining.
Good. That was the question.
Yeah. One of the things. I remember in Ken Houston's book one time, he mentioned he got barred because he completely changed his look, but somebody recognized either a ring or a watch that was very distinctive. And
in fact, I mentioned that in Blackjack for Blood on one of the sections on camouflage. I remember I specifically state, do not wear distinctive jewelry because they look for that. Yeah, and I never do. I never wear any jewelry except for a ring because I use the ring to count aces. Like I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then rotate the ring like that. That's 4 aces and 5, 6, 7, 8. And if I'm doing it with 6 decks, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter turn, 8, 12, and like that. Every quarter turn is 4 aces for a 6 deck game, and then after that, I'm just counting them on my fingers. So I use the ring and for single deck, I even take the ring off because you don't need it because there's just 4 aces, or 4 aces,
yeah.
So wedding rings generally wouldn't work for that.
Well, this isn't really working.
Very recently was the Blackjack Ball. And I do not remember having seen you there before.
No, it was my first.
So you had heard of it, I assume.
I had heard of it, yeah.
So what was your thoughts?
Oh, it was great. I really had a good time. It was wonderful actually putting a face to the people that I had email discussions with and correspondence with for years, And also I sat when we had dinner, I sat at the same table with Ed Thorpe, and that was a real treat.
Yes.
That was a real treat.
I had that experience last year, and it was the highlight of my ball.
Absolutely. He looks great.
He is unbelievable. He must have a painting in his attic.
Yeah, the Dorian Gray. He's your real name, Dorian Gray.
Yeah.
I mean, because I've seen pictures of him from 15, 20 years ago, and they look the same.
Yeah.
I mean, and he looks good. He was fun to talk to. He was very personable. Yeah, that was a real highlight for me.
Yes, I can see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish he would stay for Sundays because we have the after party on Sundays where it's a lot more casual. People get a lot more chance to talk to each other.
Right.
At the ball, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, I think it was, he did come to my house for the after party, which was a big throw for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it'd be nice if he stayed for the Sunday party as well. We also started something it almost started last year, but it really kind of got more formalized this year, which is we have a dinner on Friday night before the ball for the Hall of Fame members.
Oh, okay.
So, it was just a dozen of us, and it's quiet, and you get a chance to talk, and that was really nice. It was really
that would be.
And spouses and stuff?
No, just
the Hall of Fame members.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, that would be interesting. That'd be great. Yeah, he had a big influence. I mean, there were 3 main books that were really influential for me in the beginning. One was Beat the Dealer. That was the seminal book that really started the revolution, and it had a big influence on me. Ian Anderson's book, Turning the Tables on Las Vegas, that was another one. And Revere's book, Playing Blackjack as a Business, Beck Parsons, that was another one. Each one was really kind of a great book in its own way. And they had strengths, but there were also weaknesses too. And if you combine them, like Thorpe's book was an intellectual, mathematical tour de force, really, But he wasn't a professional player. He didn't want to be,
Right.
So from the practical aspects of it, with respect to camouflage, bet spread, and all the rest of it, it's fairly weak with respect to that because that wasn't his focus, Anderson's book. Anderson was I think a very gifted writer, And Turning the Tables in Las Vegas was just a fun read. I mean, the guy can write. He's a good writer. And he understood the camouflage aspects very well, And there's just a lot of really good stuff in there. His mathematical approach was a little limited, but he knew what he needed to know to play a winning game, So it was a compliment. And Revere was a hustler. He wasn't.
But for me, I started with Revere's book. That's the first book that I got. And for me, it may still be the best book for learning.
It is a good book. Yeah.
With all the way he laid out the quizzes and the strategy charts and everything, it was a great book to learn with.
And the one thing he stressed that the others did not stress was you have to play perfectly. There's no room for sloppy play in this game. And in my experience, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Like even Thorpe in his book, he said, well, people make somewhere in Beat Theater, he says, yes, errors occur when you count, but there doesn't tend to be a trend. So you're a little bit high on this number and a little bit low on that one. It all comes out in the wash. No, that's not been my experience. Maybe overall, if you look at 1,000 decks, it works out that way. But when we're talking about this deck, it doesn't matter that you're going to make a mistake in the other direction on the next deck. It's what happens in this deck that counts. So that was one thing. And in speaking with him, he would also emphasize that because I met with him a few times. And he would mention, you've got to drill. You've got to do it perfectly. There's no room for errors. And once I really got that through my head, I started doing much better. So he was really right about that. That he really did get right. He was an interesting guy, though. The thing is, he didn't do his own mathematical work. He had Julian Braun do his calculations for him, and he had some superstitious beliefs and misapprehensions. And one time, he got really upset with me. He had decided in one of the early editions of Playing Blackjack as a Business. He said, when you deal, if you're playing like I think he mentioned a 4-deck game because of the time. When you get down to the last deck, it behaves as a single deck because the average count will be 0. It behaves as a single deck. So you can play it as a single deck with stand on 3-card 16. He said all the little adjustments I've given you for basic strategy with single deck, the card compositions that comprise your hand, which can cause you to change a little bit. Like, for instance, if you have 10-6 against a 10, you hit. If it's 3-card 16, you stand like that. You can now play that last deck as if it were a single deck. So I called him. I said, listen, Larry, that's not right. I said, it is true that if you were to, let's say, have a 4 or 6 deck game and you deal it down and it turns out the count is, let's say, 0 with 1 deck remaining, just coincidentally at 0, that last deck will play very close to a single deck. Not exactly, because there are probabilities that can occur there that could not occur with a single deck just because there's so many cards of the same suit. But I said it will play very similar to a single deck. But I said randomly dealing down a 6-deck game or 4-deck game to 1 deck, that last deck does not deal any different. It isn't any different than the first card coming off the shoe. It averages 0, but all the probabilities of 6 decks or 4 decks are still there. And I said, he goes, no, that's not right. I said, okay, I'll prove it to you, Larry. I said, let's say we have a 6-deck game. The dealer shuffles it. He gives me, you're saying that last deck's going to play, and because the average is going to start at 0, that last deck is going to play as a single deck. What if I just put the cut card right at one deck and that last deck comes to the top? Are you now saying that deck is going to behave as a single deck game? And big silence on the end of the phone. And he says, Bryce, he says, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. So I said, you know what, Larry? My point exactly. Click.
You mentioned that you had a computer company back then.
Yeah.
Do you still have a business, or you just...
No, well, right now I manage an investment fund. But at that point, I had a microcomputer distribution company called CompuStar. And we distributed microcomputers, Apple, IBM, even the IBM PC, and Compaq and others. And we also had several actual retail storefront computer stores, which were called the Computer Store, the main flagship store.
Oh, I remember those.
Yeah, the main flagship store was in Santa Monica. So I had that for a number of years, and then I had that for about 15 years, and then I finally sold that out. I sold that business. And then actually, for a while, I was working for the LA Times as basically a senior manager in their home delivery section.
Huh.
Yeah, it's like basically a district manager, above a district manager, a district general manager for their home delivery thing. And then after that, I basically developed I basically manage a closed investment fund for family, some other people, and that's really what I've been doing for about the last 10 years. In addition to playing blackjack, but blackjack is better as an avocation, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Bryce, thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure for me,
I had known
too.
your name for 30 years or so, but it was interesting putting a face to the name.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
So at the end of our show, Richard and I usually have a recommended section. So Richard, do you have something to recommend today?
My recommendation this week is an email that comes out every Sunday called Recomendo. And it's just an email where they send out 5 recommendations of theirs every week. And, often there might only be 1 or 2 in there that's of interest to me, because they're of all kinds of different things, like the best, potato peeler somebody found or whatever. But, usually there's at least one thing in there that I find of interest. So we will put a link in the show notes for Recomendo, and comes every Sunday.
Well, good. So when I run out of a recommendation, I can just look at
Look
that
there
email
and have one to be recommend on the show. Yeah, there you go.
So people who've listened before know that last week I told a story at a theater in downtown Las Vegas at the A Public Fifth Theater. My compensation was a show for 2 people. So Bonnie and I went to a show last Friday night. And the show was good, and its run is over, so I'm not really going to talk about the show. What I do want to talk about, though, is after the show, there is they talk to the cast and the director and any of the audience who wants to stay, and a certain number of the theater employees about the show. So you're having this conversation about, which of the characters was more believable and why, and what do you think somebody meant by this. So I always enjoy these kind of egghead conversations, and this theater does this every show all the time, and I think that's a cool thing. I wish more theaters did that.
Right, they call it The Buzz, and as you say, they do it for every show. So I've recommended this theater in the past. So if you're into theater, whenever you come to Vegas, just Google A Public Fit and see if they have a show going on, because they do really quality work, and then they have these good discussions afterwards. So check it out.
Thank you, Bryce Carlson. Thank you, Richard. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.